more specifically related to ESCO startups and operation in industrialized and developing countries. Welcome, Mr. Langlois. Mr. Oğuz Kürşat Kabakçı, who is the Energy Performance Contract Group Coordinator at the Republic of Turkey, Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. Welcome, Mr. Kabakçı. Ms. Leah Webster, who is a principal at Facility Energy Solutions based in Oregon, United States. Her expertise in measurement and verification of energy savings has developed over decades of field practice and industrial leadership activities. Ms. Webster has authored many publications, including the US government's measurement and verification guidelines for performance contracts. Welcome, Ms. Webster. And finally, Mr. Denis Tanguay, who is the Executive Director at Efficiency Valuation Organization, in short EVO, which develops, maintains, improves, and publishes the International Performance Measurement and Verification Protocol since 1997. Mr. Tanguay's experience includes working for the Government of Canada, serving as the CEO of the Quebec Energy Efficiency Association, and providing independent consultancy focusing on electricity trade issues and general energy policies. Please be informed that this session is being broadcasted live in Turkish and English languages. And without more ado, I would like to start with our first speaker, Mr. Pierre Langlois from Econoler. Mr. Langlois will present the essential role of measurement and verification in energy performance contracting. Mr. Langlois, the floor is yours. You are muted right now, I guess.
And unmute. Okay.
There you go.
So you should see the screen.
Not yet.
See it now?
Yes, it is. If you could make a full screen.
It is, and
perfect.
That's good?
Yes, thanks.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to address my colleagues in Turkey. I had the chance to work in Turkey a few years back with the ministry, working especially on that topic of performance contracting and energy efficiency in both the private and public sector. And so it was a great pleasure for me to contribute to the progress of that concept and knowledge associated with within Turkey. So I'm glad to be here and glad to have the chance to contribute to the event. My topic is essentially going to be the measurement verification at the core of energy performance contracting, as the use of performance contracting is growing pretty much all over the world. The interest about it is significant, and the role of measurement and verification is so important in core that it's definitely worthwhile to spend sometimes looking at the interests and topics related to that subject. So we know, as an introduction, obviously, that cost-effective investment in energy efficiency are estimated in billions of dollars annually. And we know that only a very small fraction of this potential has been exploited. So there's a lot of opportunities there. And energy performance contracting, EPC in short, is an alternative mechanism that can play an important role in unlocking such potential. It essentially addresses the barriers that are commonly present that prevent these projects to be implemented in a normal market where you have a project that is technically not challenging, which is recognized as being efficient, and where there is a financial viability, financial interest by stakeholders to implement it. Normally, these projects should be implemented, but all of you know, obviously, that there are barriers within the market. These projects are not implemented, and one among other barriers is the lack of trust within the financial return of these projects. So EPC has been developed to address these barriers. It's one of the mechanisms that can be used. I don't think we can say that it's the only one, so that's one of those. But it's certainly an interesting one because it addresses a lot of these barriers and enable that concept of energy efficiency, those projects to be implemented. All of you know as well that EPC implies that there's a payment mechanism that is linked with the provider, the ESCO, on the performance of the project. So either we use a shared saving mechanism, either we use a guaranteed savings mechanism. In any cases, the ESCO, as the concept that they use, the EPC, implies that their remuneration in part or totally is going to be directly related to the performance of the project. It therefore implies that we have to define what is that performance and calculate how much savings are generated, estimate or evaluate in one way or the other how these savings are valued, essentially to link that payment to the actual real savings. And it implies as well that those savings has to be recognized by all parties. They have to be agreed upon. They have to be rather accurate, and they have to be good enough as far as the concept to enable either the payment in the case of a share saving, or either the guarantee from the ESCO on the other end and a guaranteed savings to be applied. So therefore, MNV is definitely an essential tool that enables APC, and we can say easily that without measurement and verification, there cannot be any performance contracting scheme to be implemented. So what is MNV? So we have to agree on a definition, and I'm sure my colleagues will go through this as well, but measurement and verification is essentially the process of planning, measuring, and I think I underline the measuring for a reason. So it has to be a component of technical engineering measurement of consumption of energy, collecting and analyzing data to verify and report energy savings resulting from the implementation of energy conservation measures. So that measurement and verification, not to confuse with monitoring and verification. So measurement implies a direct engineering measurement of the actual consumption of energy, either related to a building or either related to a specific measure, but there has to be that component. Measurement and verification is a science that's been developed over the last 40 years, and it evolves into a process that has actually a structure around it. It has to be structured in a way that it allows the repeatability, meaning that you can repeat that same process and come to the same conclusion, as well as adequate validation of the energy savings by any party involved in the project. So in the EPC, naturally, you will have at least a beneficiary, you will have an ESCO, and those parties who are linked contractually on the performance of the project have to agree on those savings. Sometimes there are going to be additional parties, including the financing party who may be involved, and those savings that are measured and verified had to be accepted by all parties. So we make sure there's a transparent mechanism that enables the EPC to work. There is therefore some kind of importance in the independence of the process, the proposed process, and the independence will come from partly the use of an internationally known protocol, so something that people can rely on, and it's not in the favor of one or the other, and by the expertise related to the one who will proceed to this measurement and verification. So we have to build confidence, and that's where, as Ecoler was one of the first ESCOs in the world, certainly the first one in Canada and the first one to develop the concept internationally in Europe, Asia, and Africa. When we started up, we understood that measurement and verification was at the core of it, but as we were there in the early 1990s, there was no such protocol, and we had to develop one by ourselves that was proposed to our client. And even though it was pretty near what the IPMVP is today, and we will rely on the same concepts, it lacked a little bit of credibility as an approach, because not only were we the ESCO designing the project and proposing the contract, but we're also the one who were designing the measurement and verification approach, and we're the one implementing it. So the concepts and methodology at that time were loosely defined without any known recognized protocol and guidelines. So it was each ESCO by itself, each client by itself. By the mid-90s, and my colleague Denis will talk a little bit more about it, but there was the need that emerged that we need to rationalize MNV activities, and we needed to create a structure, a standard that we can refer to as the best practice within the market And that's where the creation of the efficient valuation organization was made. And it developed the IPMVP based on gold standard of measurement and verification from all parties. And it was done by hundreds of people who were interested in the topic and got involved into the design of such protocol. The strength of the IPMVP is essentially relies on its flexibility, so it can be used in any kind of projects, any kind of energy conservation measures, any type of contractual agreement. It's impartial in the sense that it's essentially technical and it does not favor one or the other party, and it does not get involved into the contractual aspects of the contract. And it's simple at some point, because as you read it, even though you're not an energy efficiency expert, probably within 30 minutes of reading the core concept, you will understand the rationale behind it. So it's not so complex as a concept. The complexity a little bit may come in the implementation, depending on the project, but conceptually it's rather simple. It relies on different options and how we can use MNV, depending on the context of the project, the length of the contract, the type of measurement that is needed, and the need of precision. So we have essentially two types of options, one related to the whole building and one related to isolated energy conservation measures. And within these two family of options, there are two in each one to adapt to the reality of each project. I think a myth that has to be addressed rapidly is that MNV is neither complex or expensive. So very often we will say, or we'll hear parties that may have a vested interest in saying that they say, well, MNV is not practical or reliable, and we cannot measure savings at 100% accuracy, which is actually true. But it doesn't mean that if you're not able to measure it at 100% accuracy, that you're not able to have a very good reference to what the savings are. And that's why one of the components within that protocol is essentially to be conservative. So what you will claim to be saved will have to be saved, but you may miss a little bit. So that's why you may not be 100% accurate, but it will always be reliable in the sense that what you will demonstrate will actually be saved. So IPMVP and MNV as essentially the merit of providing a reliable, repeatable, and verifiable standardized method needed for any specific purpose. Too expensive. Well, it will happen from clients, it will happen from different stakeholders to say, well, there's no point to use EPC because it's costly, and one of the costs around it is essentially measurement and verification. Well, actually, there is a cost associated with it for sure, but the cost is not too expensive. So it would be like around 3 to 5% of project capital cost, but it's essentially fundamental for EPC to have this. And not only that, but essentially MNP will also provide its own efficiency, gaining the efficiency and additional savings, because you cannot actually manage what you don't measure. And in that case, we will contribute to the success of the project, not only by the measurement and verification itself of the savings, but also by contributing to identify sources of inefficiency and correct them so we generate more savings. It will have a very little impact on the RR when we have a 3% of capital cost related to MNB. So we cannot claim either that it's too expensive to be done. And not possible, then that's been said by people who don't understand MNB, because they will say it's too complex, it cannot be done and all that. Well, any experienced MNB expert will tell you that it's always possible to do something, as long as you have the appropriate skills and knowledge to develop the appropriate plan that is related to a specific project. And it's not so complex to do so if you want to. You may complexify things as much as you want, but there's ways to do it that are not too complex, not too costly, that do the job, achieve the purpose, and still contribute very efficiently to the EPC concept. One of the things that has to be said is, even though we have a protocol, you'll understand that each project will need to have its specific plan. And we cannot have a measurement and verification approach which is efficient without having a very strong plan. It starts by having a plan. And that plan has to essentially be developed by whoever, as long as the parties agree that the plan is acceptable to them and it meets the requirement of the project, or related to the complexity on the technical side, or related to the length of the contractual agreement. The plan has to follow base principles, which are essentially to be site-specific. So you cannot just duplicate plans for one to the other. It have to be adapted. They have to state which M&D option has to be retained. So we have to understand right away the limitation of what we will do and accept those limitations and live with the fact that the balance between precision and cost is going to satisfy all parties. It will detail the M&D method used for each ECM or the global project. So we know exactly the formula that's going to be used, exactly the adjustment that will need to be applied when needed. And that way, there's no surprise when we implement such plans. And they have to provide a very well-defined baseline energy use. And therefore, that baseline has to be done prior to the implementation, because we understand that once the project is implemented, the ECM is in place, then obviously that baseline disappears. So that baseline has to be well developed, because that's going to be the fundamental part of what measurement and verification will be all about, but it has to be well designed. And it helps manage the risk for all parties and minimize contractual disagreement on performance of project. In my 30 years experience as an EPC expert around the world, I've been involved in a lot of litigation, a lot of problems related to these kind of projects, and either clients or ESCOs or governments or banks came back to me to say, well, how can we address that? I would say 90% of the time, it's always because there's a lack of M&D plan, a bad M&D plan, a non-understood M&D plan, or badly designed one. So once we have that, the risk of having a problem is very minimized. And we have to agree that that plan has to be developed and agreed by all parties prior to project's implementation, never after. It happened in cases where I came in and they said, well, we have a disagreement. Okay, show me the plan that you have. Show me the M&D plan. Well, we don't have one yet. That cannot happen. You need a plan prior to implementation that all parties agree. The expertise, M&D is a science like any other sciences, so you need to have an expertise related to it. So M&D principles are fundamental. They have to be stated and must be attended by adequate skills by individuals who will exercise a professional judgment related to this. And there's essentially two approaches to understand how it can be done. M&D can be done by contractually involved party that have the expertise to do so. I would say here mainly the ESCO who is involved in EPC. It could technically be the client who would have that expertise, but naturally ESCO will need to have that expertise internally. And therefore, very often the ESCO design the plan and implement the project and implement it. But it can also be done by third parties, people who are not invested at all in the project, neither as the client, neither as the ESCO, neither as the financier, and we're a third party to essentially be able to have a non-biased approach to the implementation of the measurement and verification. So therefore, there's a need for the industry professionals. So we need to have capacities. We need to have good experts who are able to do so. Well, so far, EVO came with a solution, which is the Certified Measurement and Verification Professional. So that's the one that is present in Turkey, but it's present around the world. That's the only real certification about measurement and verification that is served as an introductory course and initial capacity building of experts. And that creates a certain level of capacity in the market. Denis will talk as well about other ways that EVO is trying to increase that capacity within the market, create the needed environment and expertise that will enable these M&D plans and globally the M&D approach related to EPC that is needed for a successful market. So in conclusion, M&D plays a crucial role in the demonstration that energy savings will be sufficient to meet the ESCO contractual engagement. We cannot have EPC without M&D. M&D is a must for EPC to work and is neither complex or expensive when conducted with a rigorous framework. The use of known and recognized M&D protocols help increase the credibility of EPC in the market for all actors, being the clients, the financiers, and introduces the risk of ESCOs to enter into problems over the contractual agreement time framework. And M&D has to be conducted by experts who have the knowledge to do so, will follow the M&D principles and establish M&D plans that are into IPMVP. M&D then becomes a risk reduction strategy for all parties involved in EPCs and enables successful market development of that concept. Thank you very much. And I'm sure my colleagues will complement on this, and I'll look forward to the Q&A session.
Thank you very much for your speech, Mr. Langlois. You have perfectly described the essential role of MMV in energy performance contracting. It's very much appreciated. So our next speaker is Mr. Oğuz Kürşat Kabakçı from the Turkish Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. Mr. Kabakçı will present the measurement and verification procedures in the public energy performance contracting legislation of Turkey. Mr. Kabakçı, the floor is yours.
Teşekkür ederim Mesut Bey. Öncelikle
Thank you, Mesut Bey. I'd like to thank everyone who contributed to the organization of this summit. I'd like to pay my respects to all of the audience and the speakers. I'll share my screen. And I'll talk about the defined MMV concept. Can you see my slides now? Not yet. Not yet. Can you make it full screen? Can you see it full screen? It doesn't matter. For energy performance contracts for the public buildings, and it is which enables the long-term contracting. So there will be contractors and the savings will be the first capital cost will be shared, and the EPC models. The legislation infrastructure has been prepared and the public institutions started implementing that. Of course, the energy when they apply EPC, they will pay through the savings. So of course, this is monitoring is important, and it is important how to do that. So I'll talk about some definitions in the legislation, and then to talk about the measurement and verification. I'll tell you how it is systematized in the system. So when we say energy efficiency measures, it could be said easily, but for the public sector, when we look at the measures, it covers the energy generation and also through the energy demand, and it covers different areas. So I make a general measure, so I can say that more than one measure can be taken as energy efficiency measure, and with this. And I think that these savings are important. There is such a large scope of definition, and the saving also is defined in this regard. And as we can see, of course, there is a decreasing the unit cost by decreasing efficiency. And also there are some references in this. The reason of this is that there is a saving, and it's about how to do the savings through some measures to be applied. And within the scope of these two definitions, the legislation is shaped accordingly, and the monitoring, and there is a definition of monitoring period. The project implementation is started, and since the moment of implementation, the monitoring period starts, and of course the measurement and verification should be conducted in the implementation. We say that in 12 months period, there needs to be a report prepared of the measurement and verification. In every 12 months, there should be a preparation of the measurement and verification report. How do they prepare this? There are certain standards. There are certain standards referenced TS ISO 5006 and also the TS ISO 515. And there is this, a person who holds a certificate for measurement and verification. This is called that should be conducted by the measurement and verification should be conducted by an expert. And of course, there needs to be a reference there. And there should be a reference energy consumption, and it is the amount of energy consumed by the area of implementation under conditions calculated according to TS ISO 5006 standard. It's the energy consumption profile with the improvements in the profile in the facility, be it in the building. These are the savings, and it is about how much share is going to be taken. For Turkey, what is generally accepted is IPMVP, but of course with the Turkish Standards Institute there is a 15 standards, and we wanted the standards to be and ISO 5006, they are translated into Turkish and they are enacted and put into practice, and they are also reference standards in our legislation. Our system, the procedure is a very similar procedure which is applied in all over the world. If there is an EPC to be signed, there is a measurement and verification plan is prepared, and this is prepared by the measurement and verification expert. And through that, with the energy efficiency measures, it's about the savings, how the savings will be reported, how they will be verified, and also the baseline comparison and how made. All these are explained in the plan. And this plan in the contractor, in the tendering process is put within the tender. If the contract is signed, as I pointed out, within the 12 months period of monitoring period, the savings verification report has to be in line with the plan, and you have a plan, and with the methods that you express, there is a 12 months of savings verification report using the current data. So there is the reporting of the savings verification of the report. And here in the legislation, I'd like to clarify something with the legislation. The contractor is doing that. They prepare the report for the administration, and there could be some conflicts here. For example, the purification of the climate data, and there are different criteria in this regard. And therefore, between contractor and the administrator, there could be some conflicts and non-compliances. This is something expected. For that, there are independent, the method is to take opinions from the independent measurement and verification experts. Our ministry will share a list of experts in MNV. And if there is a conflict, the administrations, they can get an opinion from the measurement and verification expert about the savings level. And if there is a comparison between baseline and the improvements and measures. Of course, for raising and training of these experts, our ministry started to hold some trainings up until now for IPMVP. The EMOS program is a valid program accepted by the ministry, and with our ministry and with EODER in the trainings that have been delivered. The IPMVP trainings have been delivered, and next year, starting from next year, our ministry will deliver the trainings for monitoring and verification. There will be a certification program, and of course, if there is a certain number achieved, the market can also work in this regard. And the energy performance EPCs will be verified, and in any case of conflict, the experts will give a professional opinion about the measurement and verification. In terms of legislation, these are the websites of our ministry. There are certain information for the foreign participants. The last link is the unofficial. There's an unofficial translation of the presidential decree is there, and in the second link there is also a video which gives information about the legislation. You can access to these addresses and you can get detailed information. So this is all from my side, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer the questions.
In the scope of the legislation regarding energy performance contracting in the public sector in Turkey. So our next speaker is Ms. Leah Webster from Facility Energy Solutions. Ms. Webster will present the developments in advanced measurement and verification. Ms. Webster, the floor is yours.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great, let me share my screen. Thank you for that presentation, both Kürs and Pierre. Share my screen. Pardon me, let me just get this set properly. Did that work?
Yes, and if you could just make it full screen, let's see if it
There
works.
we
Yes,
go.
perfect.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Okay, wonderful. Hello, everyone. My name is Leah Webster, and I am an IP MVP specialist. I have been on the IP MVP technical committee now for more than 10 years, less than 15. I am currently working on rewriting the document for our 5-year periodic 5-year renewal. And oops, pardon me. And this is my agenda today. So I wanted to speak with you about the IPMVP. We've heard a lot of good background information, and I want to run through some of the technical aspects of the document. I'd like to speak a little bit about the difference between the protocol that is the IPMVP and what you might need in an M&V guideline for a specific application. And then I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about advanced measurement and verification. This is an area that is gaining a lot of traction in the United States and elsewhere, and has a lot of potential. And it's very informative and fun for M&V. So we'll get going. I may go a little bit fast. These slides can be available if you'd like them. The IPMVP is used worldwide, as it has been mentioned. It's in 10 languages, including Turkish. So I encourage you to find it and to read it for yourself. The primary thing that this protocol provides are the principles of M&V. It provides a framework for which to determine energy savings. Terms, it provides terms and definitions, equations for determining savings, 4 different M&V options which can be used with those equations, and then specific requirements for M&V plans and M&V reports, which are all very key elements to having confidence in your savings results. The principles of M&V follow the core principles of engineering, and following these principles throughout your measurement and verification planning and execution process ensures that your savings are reliable and that you have confidence in them. So they will be as accurate as possible for the given level of savings and budget available. They will be complete, measuring the important and significant factors. They will be conservative. This is a very, very important piece. Savings must be generally underestimated. This is conservative for everyone. It needs to be consistent. The plan needs to be clear enough that it is repeatable. The work needs to be relevant, measuring all of the necessary performance and energy parameters. And it must be fully transparent. Full disclosure of technical details, of financial details, and other elements of the process is paramount. So we have 4 M&V options. Options A, B, C, and D. Not very creative, but easy to remember. Retrofit isolation, options A and B. You're measuring the piece of equipment or the system itself that you have affected with your energy efficiency or energy measure. And in a whole facility approach, you could look at the entire facility or a subset of that facility using option C, which is whole facility. And that is what we primarily see in the advanced measurement and verification realm. Or you could use option D, which is a calibrated simulation approach. This is typically the least used option because of expense and engineering effort required. These 4 options, their primary differences are in the data that's measured, the analysis that are required, and the engineering expertise required to execute that analysis. This is the primary savings equation in the IPMVP. We call the savings avoided energy consumption because it is the energy consumption you have avoided using during the reporting period. It's very important that these quantities are evaluated under equivalent conditions. And so therefore, we have adjustments that are made. Pardon me. We have routine adjustments and non-routine adjustments. So the routine adjustments are what we expect to change. These are the independent variables that we know are going to vary across the period, whether occupancy of the facility, production rates, a variety of things could come into play there. When you apply the routine adjustments, so we consider reporting period conditions and we adjust the baseline energy, and this is the adjusted baseline energy. So we're predicting what would have been if we had not done the project. Sometimes, however, we need to make non-routine adjustments to account for the unexpected changes in energy. I know we all had changes in our facilities due to COVID-19 shutdowns, and we saw some dramatic shifts in energy due to that. So this raised some interesting challenges. and really made us learn how to do non-routine adjustments. If there's a good thing about COVID-19, we've learned how to do non-routine adjustments. So if you look at the equations, this is the primary equation. So the routine adjustment has taken the baseline period energy and it has adjusted it to the reporting period conditions. So by considering the weather and other variables during that period, you're able to adjust your metered baseline energy to what it would have been had you not done the project. And then if you have unexpected changes, you have non-routine adjustments that are required. When you look at the IPMVP, you will see that we have two sets of equations. We have the primary equation and we have this secondary equation, which is simplified. So you will see the adjusted baseline energy is shown in that second equation already with the routine adjustments included. So let's look at the same process using a diagram instead. So this is the basic energy use diagram you'll find in the IPMVP, showing the baseline period on the left before the project was implemented, the reporting period on the right after the project is implemented. So in the baseline period, this is a typical option C or whole building approach like you might see in an advanced M&V approach. So you have a metered baseline, you develop a baseline energy model using regression analysis. You take the conditions in the reporting period and you adjust that baseline energy, and you have the adjusted baseline energy, or what would have happened without the project. And that is indicated by this green line here is the predicted adjusted baseline energy. And then we have your savings, are the difference between your metered energy use during the reporting period, shown by this dark blue line, and the adjusted baseline energy. Those are your savings. And if we once again look at the equation, and this is the simplified equation, you'll see there are the savings, it's the adjusted baseline energy less the reporting period energy, plus or minus any non-routine adjustments that are required. So that's the basic overview. I hope that was helpful for those who have not read the IPMV closely or practiced those terms. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's not complicated. I hope that didn't look complicated. M&V guidelines are different than the IPMVP. Two of the most popular M&V guidelines in the United States are shown here. These are, the first one is ASHRAE Guideline 14, and the second one is the Federal Energy Management Program's M&V guideline that is specific for performance-based contracts. This is the document that the Department of Energy's any performance contracts done in the federal government in the United States follows this guideline. I'm the primary author on that guideline. It very much adheres to IPMVP, although it allows for contracting more risk management than the IPMVP might. These have program-specific and application-specific requirements. They're more prescriptive. ASHRAE Guideline 14 is very prescriptive. It has actually mandates on how you adhere, whereas the FIMP M&V guideline is more general, but it is also much more detailed. I would encourage you to find the FIMP guideline version 3.0, which is functionally an unabridged version of the guideline 4.0. I've listed it here, and I posted last night on my website in case you wanted, it was too large. I have links to all of these documents, so please feel free to jot down the facilityenergysolutions.com website. And if you go to the publications page, you can find a link to this version 3. But these are some of the best resources that I've found specific to both ESPC and advanced M&V, since these are my topics today. And we have EVO, so we have our IPMVP. We have several supporting documents in form of application guides. We also have M&V guide templates or an M&V plan template. ASHRAE Guideline 14 is very useful for prescriptive approaches. It includes a monthly approach. The FIMP has very many resources. The Risk and Responsibility and Performance Matrix was developed in the version 3.0, and I think you'll find if you can find a version 3.0 with the appendices, it has an example M&V plan that's a fill in the blank. And it's very much geared towards the ESPC context and looking at risk and responsibility allocation, which is not as much the focus on the IPMVP and on the ASHRAE guidelines, are much more around the proper M&V. Whereas the DOE and other ESPC resources are more focused on that allocation of risk contractually. So looking at all of these is very useful to understanding the landscape. There are several states in the United States that sponsor ESPC programs for state agencies. Colorado, Washington, and Oregon are the ones that I'm most familiar with, but there's probably others. They have example contracts and other kinds of guidance. So as you move forward, you might be able to leverage some of these tools for your own use in your programs. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk about advanced measurement and verification. Advanced measurement and verification is really talking about the use of high frequency whole building energy data in most cases. This area of M&V has arisen. It's always been available if you had the data, but now that so many facilities have high frequency interval meters from their electric utility, it has really taken off and gained a lot of traction, and are a lot of programs and projects that are being implemented under this kind of an M&V approach. So we worked on this, we released this white paper about a year ago that gives us a snapshot on the industry, where we are, how we got there. It covers some of the specialized software that are available, and this is a big development area that's come a long way and is continuing to move forward. There are many free and open source M&V platforms now, or at least several. And then we have to manage non-routine events, and in advanced measurement and verification, it's much more straightforward than in other approaches. And it also allows us to use time of use energy values. And so as portfolios from our electric companies change, and we have solar and we have demand reduction goals, applying these time of use energy values to our savings stream is increasingly, an important capability. We are currently working on an application guide. This white paper that you see here was meant to be a precursor for that. So we will have that out in a few months, so look for that. Some of the benefits of advanced measurement and verification are semi-automated model development, so that it can be used in some cases at scale, and it can also be more easily replicated. It provides very accurate results if facilities operate in a stable operational pattern. It can have much lower M&V costs, It can really help you detect non-routine events and the need for non-routine adjustments if something changes. This is a very powerful tool, especially for longer term contracts that things can change and may go undetected otherwise. The real-time savings opportunity to get immediate feedback and results, to have more reporting than just on an annual basis, to use automation to set up and to have a dashboard, if that's what you were inclined to have, it makes this possible. There are application issues. However, like with anything great, the devil is in the details, and the engineering is very important. So we are primarily using regression analysis for these energy models. So data access to your energy is very important. The need for steady operations in your facility is paramount to this method being lower cost and easy to apply. If you have changes in your facility, your model will look more like this. Say your data will be very scattered, and you will not be able to have reasonably acceptable statistical criteria. And I mockingly call these bad buildings, but it's a real percentage of facilities that do not meet these model fit criteria that you find across the industry. Tracking static factors. Static factors, of course, are a basic item in the IPMVP that's described. It's everything that's not your energy measure, and it's not an independent variable. So it's anything else that could be going on at the facility. So I have a list here. This is from our application guide on non-routine events and adjustments that IPMVP released earlier this year. And large changes to the facility, changes in the number of occupants, changes in the hours of use, changes in the lighting, cooling, ventilation systems. These are changes that may not be planned, but can have a dramatic impact on whole building energy use. So tracking these static factors and documenting them during the baseline is a very important piece of using a whole building approach, and it can require creative solutions. Another big issue is what M&V software you might want to use and what kind of a model you might create. So this is a M&V software. This is the open source software that are available. This is from our white paper or snapshot on advanced M&V. And there are many choices, and you will get different results depending on the tool, which one of these software tools you use, and then which one of these model types is chosen. So this is a very important decision, and there's a lot to know there in choosing a tool, and there's some guidance here. This is a snapshot here when you're developing a model. This is your raw data. Some raw data will lend itself to being modeled easily. You can see the trends. They're color coded in this particular diagram between occupied as blue, unoccupied as red, startup and shutdown periods. And this allows you to have separate models for each one of these representative load curves. So one of the very popular kinds of models right now, or it has been for a long time, are the change point models. And this is what is indicated here, linear change point models. It's a series of linear regression models that are pieced together based on what is actually happening physically in the building. This is a preferred approach with many practitioners because it provides a performance indicator. I can clearly see how much my cooling energy is changing as the temperature increases, for example, and the slope of these lines are pieced together into a combined equation that's applied. The time of week and temperature model is now the given favorite. It functionally uses, although it does not outperform some of these change point models, oftentimes they're pretty equivalent. And it is a series of linear change point models itself in the time of week and temperature. So non-routine events, this is a pretty, once you have your model and you have your data and you've overcome your other challenges and are well on your way to a happy advanced M&V project, non-routine events can and will happen and need to be detected and managed. And this is one of the strengths of this option C methodology, is that it does allow you extra tools and to easily identify these non-routine events, which typically these represent changes in those static factors that we talked about, the static factors at the site, the heating, cooling, the number of square feet, the occupancy. So these kinds of changes in the energy use pattern provide you a great red flag that you have a change in a static factor back at the site that you have to go and verify and validate and consider for a non-routine adjustment. So we've developed an application guide on non-routine events and non-routine adjustments. This is a pretty big development in measurement and verification. I've been doing this my professional career, and it's always been the big Achilles heel and the weak spot. And so we have filled that, and it's a really strong development. This guide is free from IPMVP. evo.world is the website. You just have to make a free account and you can download that guide. It's really, I wrote it with the help of many of my colleagues, and it is the current best thinking from many folks that I give credit to. COVID-19, as I mentioned earlier, really highlighted the need for the non-routine adjustments. The release of the IPMVP non-routine adjustment guide was very timely, and in that it came out right before COVID-19 started to affect everyone. And so we have gotten some good practice using these methods. These are the methods that are presented in the non-routine event and adjustment application guide from IPMVP. And this is in the order of preference, pretty much. And these apply for different scenarios. What I'm showing in this diagram to the left is number 5. And so functionally what we're doing, because we have mathematical models of our energy use, we can isolate the time period that is affected by the non-routine event, and we can model that also, and we can mathematically determine the difference. And if it is significant, it's a very, very concrete and clear way to assess these sorts of unanticipated changes. So I encourage you to take a look at that. We released, after the application guide was completed, we released this subsequent white paper on the impacts of COVID-19. There were also a couple of articles related that we published in the EVO magazine. But this has some great examples, including this one on how to make non-routine adjustments, given COVID as an example. So it's the 25th anniversary of the IPMVP. It really makes me feel old, but it's also very exciting because we're releasing a new version, and I think it's going to be really much improved. It's the 5-year update. So we have a shorter document in Core Concepts 2016-2017, and we are coming back to a larger, more comprehensive content. So it's going to be a little bit longer, but it's also going to be more comprehensive. It clarifies the M&V process, IPMVP adherence. It updates to options A and B. The retrofit isolation approaches have been clarified a bit. And you will need to get a new translation because the one that you have will be out of date. So I thank you very much for your attention.
So thank you very much for your speech, Ms. Webster. I liked how you said if there is a good thing about COVID-19, it is that we have learned how to make non-routine adjustments. So your presentation was very clearly explained and enlightening, especially the application and technical issues regarding the advanced measurement and verification, were, I believe, very helpful to better understand and effectively implement measurement and verification in the future in Turkey. So our final speaker is Mr. Denis Tanguay from Efficiency Evaluation Organization. Mr. Tanguay will present building trust in energy savings through capacity building. Mr. Tanguay. We can't hear you for some reason. You're not on mute, but we cannot hear you. There must be something wrong with the microphone.
That's the hardest part.
It is, yeah. Let's wait for.
Sorry, it was on.
Oh, there you go.
It was my. Anyway, it was on you. Now I'll try the other screen. Sorry about that. Share screen.
Yeah. Now we can hear you, but we cannot see you.
Sure. Okay, it's coming. Can you see it now?
Not yet. But yeah, your screen at least, yeah, but not yourself.
Oh, well, since you see the screen,
I think yeah, that might not be as necessary. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay. Well, thank you for the invitation, and so I'm very glad that Pierre and Leah did a great job at presenting the technical aspect of the IPMVP, so I will not have to do that. What I would like to focus on today is to position the measurement and verification into the energy efficiency ecosystem, and see why it is useful. I mean, we've seen a lot of discussion on the technicality of it, but why is it important? And that's what I want to focus on. In the energy efficiency literature, we have a lot of discussion on risk associated with energy efficiency. I've written 5 today to introduce the topic and to get to the M&V one. In any project, you have economic and financial risk. It could be related to interest rates, inflation, or economic. If you have an economic downturn and you need to close your business, if you did an energy efficiency project, savings will not materialize. So you have these kinds of risks that are usually not under your control. There are behavioral and operational risks. Whenever you have human involved in the operation of a building or the occupation of a building, you cannot control how they will behave in that building. So there are some risks that the building will not be operated necessarily as it was designed, and the energy efficiency measures that you're implementing may not as well materialize as you expected. There are contextual and technological risks as well. You may implement an energy efficiency measure with a certain technology, and all of a sudden you have issues with that technology. So that's a risk as well that has to be managed in some ways. Regulation is another sector where you have potential risks. Regulations may change. They may not. They may force you to do other things that you have already done. Risks that you usually don't control. Risks associated with measurement and verification, and these are under your control. Why MNV? Well, MNV is a risk management tool, essentially, but not only for you as a building owner or as an engineer, but for all the parties that are involved in any project, whether it's energy efficiency or renewable energy projects. So you're really helping in the overall risk management of the project. It also bridges government policies, goals, and objectives in demonstrating the materiality of energy savings. Someone mentioned before me that savings is the absence of energy consumption. Well, as Pierre usually says in his presentation, well, the absence of something cannot be seen, but it can be measured. So MNV is the tool that you use to show that these savings are real. And why do you want to show that the savings are real is because you need to instill confidence, trust, and credibility that these savings can be valued. No savings can be valued if they are not first of all demonstrated. So that's where MNV plays a crucial role in risk management. In that sense, since it's useful for all the parties involved, MNV will contribute to smoothing business transactions and avoid potential conflicts in the future if, as Pierre mentioned, the MNV plan was well designed and is well followed by the parties involved. And in that sense, MNV will play the role of meter of energy efficiency projects. MNV has to be deployed within a structured approach. And for that, there are three main aspects of MNV. The first one is technical. You need technical frameworks on how to measure the savings. You need professionals that are able to interpret those technical frameworks and be able to apply them in their day-to-day activity and professional activities. And of course, you need adequate financing and risk management strategies for your projects. So let's look at them individually. The first one is the technical documents. Leah did a great job at presenting the content of the IPMVP. One thing that is important to remember here is that the IPMVP applies to energy efficiency at the project level, not at the regional level or the country level. It's really project specific, and every project has its own dynamic, and that's why you need a protocol for project level. Leah mentioned many of the recent guides that we've done recently, and I have to admit that the last 18 months have been extremely intense in terms of protocol development and deployment with NEVO, white papers, and conferences. So I really invite you to browse our website and find those documents and read them. Guides that were not mentioned by Leah, we have one MNV guide for energy performance contracting that should be published by the end of this year. We have an updated statistics and uncertainty guide. The non-routine event guide was mentioned. We have one on evaluation, measurement, and verification of projects. So a very active period for us, but the point here is that these technical documents are one of the three legs of MNV. The other one is training and capacity building. The most the main program that we have is the CMVP, the Certified Measurement and Verification Professional, that we've been deploying now for more than 15 years now in conjunction with the Association of Energy Engineers. It's a joint program. We're training more or less 1,000 people every year. We've trained 15,000 people so far, including Turkey. And it's our flagship program based on the MNV fundamentals training program that we have. For more complex programs and projects, we developed the Certified Energy Savings Verifier, which is based on the CMVP, and it's adding more specialized training, including the energy audits of projects. So it's linking the technical side of projects with the financing and financial aspects of energy efficiency conservation measure. And it's meant to help financial institutions, for example, who don't know anything about energy savings, most of the time, to hire these people and help them in assessing the validity of investing in energy efficiency projects. There are also other training and capacity building programs that we have, including ISO 50006, 15, and 47. Just a note to mention that our course on 50006 and 15 have been translated into Turkish and are available now in the market. And then we have the third leg of MNV, the MNV framework. It's financing and risk management. One of the main problems we see in energy efficiency financing is the fact that when you finance an energy efficiency project under traditional mode, it reduces the core business financing available for other projects for a client. So you don't have more credit capacity because you're implementing energy efficiency. But the main challenge here is not the availability of money, it's the access to more money under commercially attractive terms. And for that purpose, there is a disconnect between traditional banking activities and clients. As I mentioned earlier, the banks don't necessarily know anything about energy efficiency, and they need evidence that the savings are material and can be valued. So the lack of confidence in savings is a very important issue. Otherwise, you don't have any additional credit available for your project. So if you have difficulties in establishing those risks and benefits, you will just have to rely on your short-term credit from existing line of credit. So to help address this issue, we developed many years ago, 11 years ago actually, the International Energy Efficiency Financing Protocol. And it's really meant as a capacity building instrument for a financial and lending institution. And it is focused exclusively on the risk assessment of an energy efficiency project. It doesn't talk about the borrower risk assessment. This is for banks, they understand that. It's really helping the bank understand, okay, if I'm implementing an ECM, what is the risk associated with this particular activity? Just for the help of the translator, ECM is energy conservation measure. I'm sorry about that. So the protocol illustrates and explains the positive financial flow of energy savings. And we just had a pilot projects completed in Mexico. And it was really revealing for the financial institution people who were on the call with this explanation of how the projects can generate those financial positive cash flow. So it was really something missing, and we're adding that to our tools. So when you look at energy savings, this is the ecosystem, the simplified ecosystem of energy efficiency related to measurement and verification. So you have those three aspects, the technical aspects, which is in the IPMVP and other protocols available in the market, including the ISO, ASHRAE, and so on. Then you have the capacity building tools training, essentially leading to certifications such as the CMVP and the CSV, and projects financing and risk mitigation, for which we have the IPMVP and the training. Pierre mentioned during his presentation that the M&V plan has to be really designed before a project is complemented. So this ecosystem of technical capacity building and risk mitigation, financial risk mitigation, really has to take place at the design stage, and then continue to be applied or implement during the implementation of an energy conservation project, and also during the evaluation or the verification period of a project. So it's really meant to be a process that goes throughout the life of a project, from the design stage to the end of the evaluation or verification period. So that's how M&V is used within the energy efficiency ecosystem, and that's why it's important, because it helps addressing all kinds of issues related to technical capacity building and financing. So M&V provides confidence, trust, and credibility that energy savings are real. And then if they are real, they can be valued. So, and if they can be valued, they can more easily be financed as well by third parties. And they can, this financing can even be backed by energy savings insurance schemes. There's one, and there are couple in Europe, I think, in South America as well. And when insurance companies are getting into such schemes, it's because the savings are considered real and they are valued. And if they are valued, they can also potentially be traded by between third parties. So the party implementing energy efficiency has the value of the savings, but they also have the value of GHG emissions, for example, that could be potentially traded in the marketplace. And finally, I just mentioned GHG. Well, M&V is really the backbone of emission calculations and support the implementation of energy transition policies and programs for governments. So hopefully I was able to quickly provide a snapshot of the usefulness of M&V within the energy efficiency ecosystem. And I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your speech, Mr. Tanguay. It was very useful to hear about the particularly like training and capacity building, as well as financing and risk management with respect to measurement or verification. So with Denis, we conclude our speech. I would like to thank again all our speakers for their speech. We can now continue with questions and answers, and I have a few questions that I will be asking randomly, so in a random order. So maybe we can start with Leah. So what are the main issues that should be considered while developing a program or application-specific M&V guideline? You explained this a little bit. I was going to ask, can you also develop a protocol specific to a country or program, or is that would be a guideline? I think that's what would be a guideline, not a protocol. But what would be the main issues that should be considered while developing such guideline? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. As a reminder, the IPMVP is a protocol. We recommend that you use the IPMVP as the protocol that it is, and develop, if you need more guidance for your program, that you develop something that follows the IPMVP, but provides more detail. And considerations are vast, honestly. Developing an M&V specifics for a specific program is what I've done professionally. And so it is your stakeholders, it is your risk allocation, it is the scope of the work that you're doing. It is the need for accuracy. It's the need for customer feedback. There's many, many considerations there, and ultimately the cost and burden and what that does with your savings. So all of those are very, it's a balancing act. It's very, I put some of my favorite ones that provide a lot of technical support in that list. So I would recommend take a look at the MNV guidelines on that list that I posted to get a better feel for it. And if you have any additional questions or need any help, feel free to send me an email.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Maybe we can continue with Lee again. Another question. Do you think, we explained advanced MNV, but do you think advanced MNV is something that you could apply in Turkey where MNV is just starting? Or since it's like advanced MNV, do you think you should first establish like an MNV framework and then move next to the advanced MNV? Do you, if you can, yeah.
A question back first. Do you have, are your utility meters interval meters?
Yes. Well,
Okay. I would highly recommend that you do not wait. Use option C. Your customers want option C. Intuitively, when they sign up for energy savings, they're really thinking option C. They're thinking their utility bill, and they're also thinking avoided savings, not normalized to some, average set of conditions. So thinking it's a great method. If you have the data, it can be a very cost-effective method, even more cost-effective than other methods if you can tackle those lists of considerations. So I would not wait. It's very discernible. It's empirical. It's from the data. You can see it visually. People love it. So if you have the capacity to execute it, I would encourage you to do so. It is, however, sometimes it has not been as widely adopted in long-term performance contracts, however, because of the inherent potential for variability if you need a very, very stable financial flow.
Okay, thank you. So Denis, I have a question regarding the deemed savings. So I know Ivo's position that deemed savings is not an MNV method to rely upon to reflect an energy efficiency project's achieved savings, but is there any room for deemed savings in MNV or in IPMVP adherent MNV?
I think Pierre wants to answer this question, but I will take a crack at it first. I think you're just asking the question for which I raised my hand a few minutes ago. In MNV, there's a very key word, and it's measurement. If you don't measure something within an MNV process, you're not doing measurement and verification. You're doing monitoring or something else, but it's not MNV. When you look at the four options that Leah mentioned, in option A, for example, there's room for some estimation of parameters, but you need to measure at least one, and usually the most important one. And then you can make hypotheses on the others or estimations, and that's probably where you can say that deemed variables can be used, but not deemed savings per se. I'm sure Pierre wants to add something.
Yeah, I think there's a differentiation between when you say can deemed savings can be used in MNV and can it be used in EPC. It cannot be used in MNV because by definition, what Denis just said is you need to measure and verify. So it would be you measure and verify without measuring. So it's not MNV. So deemed savings cannot be in an MNV protocol. I know in Saudi Arabia they added it, but it makes actually no sense because measurement and verification, again, implies measurement. So deemed savings does not imply measurement. If the question is, can you use deemed savings in EPC, then the answer is different. Then you can agree with client that part of the savings can be assumed being deemed because it may be too costly to measure, too not precise enough to do so. The long term does not enable MNV to be cost efficient, so there's some reasons to do that. But I would add that if you would have an EPC without MNV and you would have only deemed savings, then it does not come to being an EPC, because EPC by definition has to link the remuneration of the ESCO based on the actual demonstration of performance. And if you assume the performance, then you're not into an EPC at all. You're just in a standard project implementation process wherein the measurement of savings does not influence at all the payment of the ESCO. So I think in the MNV concept, the answer should be no. In the EPC, say yes, potentially, but in part and certainly not totally. And I would add probably more significant, it would be based on measurement and verification. And alternatively, on a lower scale, probably deemed savings can be used.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pierre. That was very informing. And so a related question to you, Pierre. Then you talked about the cost of MNV in EPC projects. So that might be one of the reasons why you would use deemed savings in EPC projects. So what are the common methods to apply to minimize and manage MNV costs in EPC projects?
Yeah, and the question is good because very often people who use EPC does not recognize upfront that EPC is not the least cost approach to implement energy efficiency projects. So Leah can confirm that in the US and Canada, some of the projects related to EPC are just related to lighting. And lighting is quite simple to demonstrate, and you may not use EPC for the purpose of just having the low cost approach. You use EPC because there's other reason. Either use it because of shared savings where you have the financing attached to it. Maybe you have it with the guarantee because the insurance company or maybe the board that you have wants the guarantee of the savings. So in relation to that, you use EPC. So EPC is not the least cost approach. Having said that, why it's not the least cost approach? Because obviously there's a guarantee attached to it, and the guarantee is linked with MNV, and MNV costs something. So if you just look at the cost aspect of things, then obviously you would say, I just implement the project, no EPC, no MNV, no nothing, and it will work, which is still not a bad approach if you want to do it. But if you want to use EPC, then there has to be MNV and there's a cost. So associated with the cost, EPC usually tends to be long-term contracts. Well, we had in the past the 5-year contract. Now we're aiming in Canada now to the 10, 15 years contract. In Europe, they aim even to the 40 years contract. Measuring savings out of a 20 or 40-year period becomes quite expensive if you use an option C, for example, because then you have to make all the adjustments all the time for 40 years. So what I say is a low-cost approach, a lower-cost approach is option B and option C. They may not be as comprehensive. They may not be as detailed. They may not capture all the interactive effects, but they still have a benefit where you lower the cost related to the adjustments. So what I've seen as a tendency in many EPC is they would use many M&D plans related to option A and option B. It reduces the cost. Everybody agrees that there's a limitation on using that as far as the precision level, but it still applies very well, and you get rid of option C. Option C is definitely one that, like Leah said, and totally agree, people understand it. It's kind of visual. That's what everybody thinks about. On the other end, if you take hospitals where there are a lot of changes on a continuous basis, having adjustments being made becomes very cost intensive, lacks of precision, and over time becomes totally unaffordable for these kind of projects. So as I mentioned in the presentation, it has to be adapted on a case-by-case basis. Lower cost is very often an objective, but it cannot be only lower cost approach. But if you want lower cost, option A and option B often are the easiest solution for that.
Thank you. Great. As we talk about the options, the different IPMVP options, I know that you cannot really, like you also mentioned, that you cannot really generalize an IPMVP option for a specific project type. But now in Turkey, we're talking about energy performance contracts in public buildings, and mainly in the renovation of public buildings. When we think about the renovation of public buildings, can you really can you really not generalize an IPMVP option, or can you do you have any comments on the IPMVP option for such projects?
I will add a little something, and Leah can certainly contribute quite a lot to that. But when you see public buildings, you have to differentiate between an hospital, huge hospital, which is very complex and the operation changed quite a lot, and little schools where all they have is lighting and a little bit of other consumptions here and there. So public facilities can tend to be very variable. An airport is a public building, an hospital is a public building, a school is and an office building is. So I would more categorize them per facility than for public and private, because it's more related to the type of measures and the complexity of the building and the incapacity to generate a general baseline that will lead you to use an option rather than the other, rather than just public and private. And Leah, you can certainly add something to this.
If it's a comprehensive update of these facilities where it's, the facade and the roof and the systems, that kind of an update, it cries out for option D. Now that said, option D.
You said, I'm sorry, D you said?
As in dog.
Okay. All right.
Calibrated simulations. Calibrated simulations are very powerful because they can model what's not there. But you do have an existing baseline. Because you have an existing baseline, you might be able to avoid using a calibrated simulation and really rely on something more like a whole building approach, option C. And if you're adding square footage, that can become more of an issue. But if it's a straight, take this facility and revamp it, a whole building approach, either option C or option D would be your best bet. So,
all right. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you. So, Denis, I have a couple of questions for you based on your presentation. I've noticed certified energy savings verifies. By the way, I've never heard of it before, so it must be something new. So this, you explained that it'll be for more complex projects that also has some energy auditing for people that also has some energy auditing experience. And you also mentioned about finance. So someone who is a certified energy auditor and CMVP, do you think someone with CEA and CMVP could automatically eligible for a certified energy savings verifies? I mean, I don't think I understand the exact difference between the CMVP and CESV, I guess.
Okay, I think both are at different ends of the spectrum. The CMVP is the fundamental knowledge of IPMVP, and it's essentially the basic general knowledge that people will acquire and which will be sufficient for most of the project. When we looked at the energy efficiency investment on a larger basis, or from an investment perspective for pension fund, for example, who wants to invest $100 million in different projects that will be different complexities and different types of projects in different types of building and so on and so on. There was one major issue that was missing, and it's the investment grade audit analysis within the analysis of energy efficiency projects, in addition to the MNV. And when we did the development of that program, one thing that people wanted to add was an advanced course on MNV planning. So in addition to the CMVP course, 2-day course on how to prepare an MNV plan, but in practice, so not just theory. And we added as well an interactive effect course component within the CESV. So essentially the CESV is the CMVP plus MNV planning course plus interactive effect plus investment grade audit knowledge. So you have like 3, 2, 1, 3 days. So we're at 6, 7, 8, 9 days of training, and one exam that goes around all those topics. And the CESV, as far as I'm concerned, and we're just starting to deploy this program, but they can definitely work for a government agency, for example, who will have to review tens and hundreds of projects within a program, or for financial institutions, or for ESCOs, or for customers with tens of buildings. So it's really something different in the marketplace that goes beyond the CMVP, but it really builds on the CMVP.
And then, I may add something, as I was a little bit involved in the design of such program, helping Evo. One of the things we realize with CMVP is quite theoretical. So we have people who actually go through the CMVP, they pass the exam, but they're not very good at doing it. So we have two types of CMVP experts: the one who have experience and are good at it, and the one who have no experience and they went through the training and the exam, but are not practical. So within what Denis said, within the exam covers the training, but it also covers the experience. So we actually request people, or Evo actually requests people to build an M&V plan. And we stress quite a lot, Leah, Denis, August, and myself, that we need experts in developing plans. And so far you understand what a plan is, but we have not shown with the CMVP if they can actually design a plan. So within the exam, there is that plan component that you have to design. So we actually can perceive if the experts are good enough to design plans given certain situation. So on top of the training, which requests everything or covers everything that he mentioned, there is a practical aspects to it. And then we can say likely that the CSV will be a good M&V expert, as the CMVP enables us to be that someone has a knowledge about M&V.
So you mean, it's required to design an M&V plan during the exam to take this? Okay.
Yes.
See, I was going to ask about the eligibility requirements. So do you also require someone to be CMVP first to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that's
yes.
okay.
Yeah, we just did a pilot this summer. We did a training in Australia in July, and they were all CMVPs. And they did the MNV planning course exam last week. So it's I don't have the results yet, but we had 9 participants. So it's really something that we're starting to deploy. And the reason why we did it in Australia is because there was a program where the government wanted to people with the MNV planning knowledge, so they could analyze the plans and prepare better plans for the purpose of that program. So it's moving on, and but definitely it's the CMVP is level 1 of the CSV, if you will. It's the first component.
Okay, so there was a question from YouTube. I believe Leah just answered, but let me just rephrase it. What would you recommend to proceed with very much limited baseline data, considering keeping the MNV costs as low as possible? Because most of the public buildings do not keep the records properly. So Leah, you may want to answer, I guess.
Sure, yes, and I responded in the chat, but that is a difficult scenario. When you don't have data, it's very difficult. So what I said is start monitoring now, smiley face. Retrofits don't happen overnight, right? There's a lot of planning, there's time. So if you don't have historic records, I encourage you to start gathering now as best as you can, and think about option D. So this is what option D is for, is when you really don't have the data. And there's times where if you have similar facilities, especially municipal facilities, schools, that nature, you may be able to leverage an option D, and you might find, doing real M&V where it's very specific for each facility may not be cost effective if you really are super limited. But there's creative solutions. There's always creative solutions. Yes, please.
Mesut, if I may just add something as an example. This week I had a call with stakeholders in a European country where we're looking at the best IPMVP options for stores located in shopping malls, because the department stores have to demonstrate energy savings, but they do not control the whole energy consumption in the building, and they cannot isolate easily. They can isolate eventually their own part of the facility, but they don't have the data, which is exactly what the question is about. And we're looking at option D in the context of that program. And we go back to the protocol versus guideline. So they will use we're thinking about using option D, protocol-ish kind of directive, but adapt it through guidelines so that these department stores can follow the guidelines that is based on the IPMVP. So it's all based on option D in that case, because it didn't have the data. So it's an option, as Leah said.
All right, thank you, Denis. So another important thing that I've seen from your presentation, Denis, is the International Energy Efficiency Financing Protocol. So I think that's very interesting. I know that it's been out there for long years, but you mentioned, I think this is very critical in Turkey, because I know the capacity of financial institutions in Turkey. So you mentioned about capacity building and pilot capacity building activities in a couple of countries. How would you decide on these countries, and how were those initiated? So are you planning any more pilot applications?
I'm planning any pilot. Well, I wouldn't say pilot applications. I would say applications, because we're done piloting it. We've done it actually we did it in Canada because the government of Canada financed the update of the protocol. It was first developed in 2009, so we decided to update it, and we did it in 2019. So it was refined, and we developed the training program that comes with it as well, and it was tested in Canada. Then we wanted to, and for the protocol, what is needed as well is a country annex. So we developed an annex for, actually Econoler did it, Pierre's company, developing the annex for the country, and we replicated that in Mexico. So we developed an annex for Mexico. We adapted the training program, which is the last module of the program, which is the country-specific discussion. And we did a pilot training with 28 participants from banks, essentially, and financial development institutions. It went quite well. We got good feedback. And all I can say is that the protocol has now been tested twice, the training material as well. So all it takes essentially is a translation of the protocol, and it's based on, at the end of the training, which is the most important part that people appreciated, is a practical exercise where people prepare an application for an energy efficiency projects, and they have to convince the bank or a jury that their project is financeable. So that, what's interesting is that this role play is done by bank officers. So they are forced to understand or to develop the arguments that potential clients will eventually give them as clients, or as, so so there's a practical and a theoretical part, and but essentially it's ready. It's just a matter of translation, mentoring an instructor, and we can deliver it. Or it's ready in English if this can be feasible. In Mexico, we did simultaneous translation. It was a little bit arduous, but it worked. So for part of the training, so. But
okay.
It's ready, essentially.
But a protocol was dated back like 11 years ago. There's no new version, right? Or
there is a new version dated 2021. It was republished in February.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I must have missed that. Okay.
And it's available for free on our website as well. You just need to create an account, and you can access it currently in French, English, and Spanish.
Okay, that's excellent. One last question for you, Denis. You also mentioned about trading measured savings. Is there an example that you could share?
Unfortunately, no. I see a theoretical, not models, but projects. I've seen projects actually to trade. Well, actually, there are, well, no, I don't have any specific example I can search around, but I have a project in mind that actually we discussed at the EVO board yesterday, and essentially the objective would be to create energy efficiency building certificates, like renewable energy certificates, that could either be traded business to business or traded in the marketplace if there is a market for it. But I'm just like that, I'm not aware of any specific trading scheme for energy efficiency certificates.
All right, thank you very much. We are going over time, so maybe last couple questions. This could be either Pierre or Leah. I mean, even Denis, but so the question is, can you please elaborate on addressing issues of low baselines due to underheating or undercooling and expressed demand, such as low energy budget allocation? I mean, that's a very big question, but I mean, I don't know.
Can you please repeat that question?
Sure. The question is, can you please elaborate on addressing issues of low baselines due to underheating or undercooling and suppressed demand, such as low energy budget allocation?
I can speak to that first part, at least. I'm not quite sure about that second part of the question. But regarding low baseline energy use because the lights are off, right? If we're talking about low performance, or the buildings are cold, or the buildings are hot because the standards of the expected conditions for those are not being met. And so that's been a very big issue in ESPCs, certainly in the federal ESPCs. So we're very, very careful in those cases to establish and measure baseline conditions. And if baseline conditions are different than reporting period conditions, such as average ambient indoor temperature, that is a non-routine adjustment. That is an apples to apples consideration. And so lighting is a very typical one where we will find lighting systems that are disabled.